Well, smoky skies continuing across much of Western Canada, reductions to air quality and visibility here in Calgary. It's pretty gross to round out the end of Stampede Week. On visible satellite here, we can see a very large upper low off to the east in Manitoba, northwestern Ontario, sort of drawing that large reservoir of wildfire smoke southeastward out of Alberta into the northern states, even pulling some of that smoke from Quebec back to the west around the north of the low and into the northern parts of the prairies. On water vapor, we can see that Alberta is basically between two areas of upper lows here. We can see the one off to the east there in Manitoba and one well off to the west coast of British Columbia, and associated jet stream sort of pushing into southern Alberta here. That's going to build that upper level ridge into the province over the next couple of days. That's going to be something to watch. At the surface, quite dry over much of Saskatchewan with dew points less than 10 degrees. As those crops are really maturing at this time of the year, that's quite dry. I tend to see kind of a really peak in dew points in the middle part of July as crops are kind of at that peak maturation. But in Saskatchewan here, we're seeing that continental Arctic air being kind of drawn down to the west of that low. And as well, it's been very dry at the surface as a result of the lack of rainfall that we've been seeing. We can see here from Environment Canada, very dry conditions, less than 40% of normal soil moisture across much of the Canadian prairies there are agricultural lands, with severe and extreme drought in portions of southern Alberta and northwest Alberta as well, developing near-term or short-term drought there in southern Saskatchewan and Manitoba as a result of that. So that's one of the reasons why it's quite dry there. Back west in Alberta, we've had a little bit more rain, and we are seeing more normal dew points, kind of in that 10 to 15 degree range across the province. And of course, that's important for severe thunderstorms because we tend to see our storm season peak to that evapotranspiration of crops, moisture getting out of the root zone soil moisture and getting up into the air, serving as fuel for these severe thunderstorms. So here in Alberta, of course, a little bit more moist, and that's why we're seeing more in the way of thunderstorm activity than areas to the east. Now, how's this going to evolve in the next few days? We're going to talk about it, kind of break it down day by day. The Coles Notes version, though, it looks like Sunday we're going to be seeing potential for severe thunderstorms, a conditional chance of storms along the central and northern foothills of Alberta. Thunderstorms largely bringing a chance of large hail as they push eastward into the evening hours. That is contingent on the wildfire smoke and the lack of upper level support that we're seeing there. So that could actually reduce the risk of a thunderstorm on Sunday, but that certainly does appear to be potential for areas along central and northern foothills. But into Monday, it looks like a far more classic severe weather setup, with thunderstorms bringing a chance of all threats, large hail, damaging winds, even an isolated tornado threat in a certain area. I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. And of course, Tuesday, as well as that system moves off to the east into Saskatchewan, thunderstorms and even some isolated tornado potential there. Now, once again, here, taking a look at the kind of progression of what we're going to be looking at. This is the North American model, thanks to the College of DuPage here displayed on their website. I really like how they've got their site kind of laid out here, starting at the top of the troposphere, moving down, and you can kind of look at all the variables you need to make a good kind of comprehensive severe thunderstorm forecast. And so moving out of Saturday afternoon into Sunday, we can see that building kind of flow aloft in the middle part of the atmosphere. This is 500 millibars up at around 6 kilometers. And that jet streak is starting to push its way into southern BC late Sunday. And so Sunday, we're seeing that increasing flow. And what you tend to see happen here on the Alberta side is sort of a responding sort of upslope flow. You get this east-southeasterly wind into the foothills combined with that sort of 30 knots of shear, or 30 knots of flow, rather. And you end up getting sort of that 30 to 40 knots of wind shear on the east side in that 0 to 6 kilometer layer that can bring the risk of thunderstorms that are more organized. So you can see supercell type thunderstorms with associated threats, large hail and damaging winds. So Sunday, of course, we are seeing, not much in the way of upper level support, but we are seeing that favorable wind shear for severe thunderstorms. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that. It's really going to be dependent on whether or not we can break the cap. We've got this sort of strong east-southeasterly wind here that's going to be pushing into the terrain. So you're looking for areas where it's going to be sort of locally backed there, perhaps west of Sundre or west of Brazeau Dam. Those are kind of two typical areas there. If we see that easterly wind kind of kicking in, we could see thunderstorm initiation there and those storms moving off to the east in a favorable environment for potentially large hail. We'll take a little look at the thermodynamics in that environment here. We can see here, if we click on a point and click forecast sounding, it looks like we've got, fairly tall and skinny Cape profile here. Fairly moist down here in the lower part of the troposphere. So that may be a little bit more of a murky appearance down low with these storms. Fairly low bases as well depending on where you are. So, I mean, this here, it does show our LCLs up around 1388 meters. That is not very low. But there are some forecast soundings in the area with lower bases, and this cape is favorable for severe weather. It looks like close to 1500 ml cape there, 140 in the 3 kilometer range down here, 0 to 3 kilometer range. So not too bad. Looking at the forecast hodograph trace though here, this looks like a fairly classic hail hodograph with you got some of the low level shear here, fairly weak, not too weak by Alberta standards, but fairly weak. But a long and straight hodograph above that. And of course, that results in a risk of large hail. And indeed, looks like 3.65 inch hail is an analog that we're seeing here, and 2.75 inch otherwise. We're talking about hail that could get up to the size of baseballs in the strongest updrafts if these do develop. But that low level shear here, I mean, we're still getting 170 in that 0 to 3 kilometer SRH, which, you couldn't rule out tornado potential with those sort of early cycles of these supercells sort of develop and push off the foothills really early on in their life cycle. You could see some tornado potential as well, but that looks like a hail sounding if we do end up getting thunderstorms that develop as a result of the upslope flow there. But here we're looking at Sunday morning and pushing through Sunday afternoon. There is still some smoke in the air. This is thanks to the fireworks smoke model from Environment Canada. As those southeasterly winds pick up during the day, it kind of starts to clear out along the foothills. There's still a bit of smoke there, but that might not be enough to kind of reduce that incoming solar radiation. Smoke can reduce thunderstorm potential by reducing incoming solar radiation, reflecting the sun's light back out to space. And then, of course, you don't heat up the ground as much, which means things stay more stable in the low levels, and you have more convective inhibition, which means that the cap is stronger and you're less likely to get surface-based updrafts. So we're going to be keeping an eye out for that on Sunday as being one of the sort of limiting factors for these storms. But moving back into Monday, let's take a look at the 250 first. Up at the top part of the troposphere here, we can see that jet streak kind of pushing into southern Alberta by 6 p.m. on Monday. That jet streak is right about here, leaving central Alberta sort of in this left exit region, which is going to help bring some associated large-scale ascent. 500 millibar jet stream here as well, kind of that jet streak pushing into southern Alberta during the day. Looks like we are seeing kind of two vorticity maxima with this. You can see this is the main upper low trough here. You're going to have your vorticity maximum here associated just north of that jet streak. Looks like we might have another one out here. Vorticity here, we can see, there's the main vorticity maximum back here over Vancouver Island with a little bit of a leading impulse kind of coming into southern Alberta. I think this is going to be important for severe weather potential. And most storms are probably going to be triggered by this one as it moves in and kind of primes the environment for severe thunderstorms. So it could be a fairly early kickoff to this storm setup here on Monday. Just comparing this to the Canadian as well. Canadian looks a little bit more progressive with that jet streak a little bit further off to the east at the same time by noon on Monday. So that just might mean that the target area for these severe storms is going to be a little bit further to the east. But back here on the North American model here, we can see that that jet streak pushes off. And as a result of that, we're going to be seeing severe weather potential here developing on the cyclonic shear side of the jet streak, which is going to mean sort of lower topped severe thunderstorms, but severe nonetheless. Here, this is a fairly classic environment for thunderstorms with all hazards. Taking a look at the surface here, we can see that Lilo, very classic as that upper trough moves in from British Columbia. We tend to see the development of this Lilo. We call it Lee cyclogenesis. If this was wintertime, you'd see the development of an Alberta clipper that pushes off to the east. Here in the summer, we can see that low developing in central Alberta and the area of interest. I really like how it looks on the Canadian as well here. And of course, here you can see in the Canadian, it's already by 3 p.m. further off to the east. So, more progressive there with that trough ejection and that departure of the Lilo off to the east. And we can see there's going to be a fairly isolated zone here on the northern side of that surface low where you're going to be seeing those ingredients really coming together with that stronger southeasterly backed to easterly flow at the surface beneath stronger southwest flow aloft. That's going to be that speed and directional shear in that kind of local area where you could be seeing thunderstorms with all hazards, including that isolated tornado potential as that low pushes off to the east during the afternoon hours. So, of course, we're going to have to watch in real time where that low develops because that's going to be the area of concern. And we can see here with the Cape map, it's showing on the sort of post-frontal side. That's where that cape is uncapped. In reality, I mean, we tend to see the warm sector side as well be uncapped in these types of situations where we've got just height falls and cooling aloft and forcing ahead upstream. You'll tend to see this be completely uncapped and unstable air flowing into the inflow of these supercells. So again, I'm a little bit concerned about this area north of Calgary toward Red Deer, somewhere in that corridor, early to mid-afternoon, looking at a potential for thunderstorms with all hazards possible. Now, this system's going to push off to the east into into Tuesday. So this is late day Monday. This is pushing off, and you can see it quickly occludes, and we end up getting that vertically stacked low, that fairly strong area of surface low pressure here in western Saskatchewan, with that occluded front sort of wrapping around there, and a bit of a dry slot kind of wrapping in here, kind of along the boundary of that dry slot where you get that daytime heating, and the occluded front. You have some convergence at the surface, cool temperatures aloft, and you can see the risk of some tornadoes developing in these areas as well. If you get a strong updraft developing, even with the wind shear here moving, let's take a look a little bit. So I guess we're talking about Tuesday now. We can see here that into Tuesday afternoon, that real occluded front sort of going off, swirling off to the southeast into Saskatchewan here. And of course, as a result of that, we have kind of a zone here where the daytime heating is a little bit stronger and you're getting a little bit more destabilization. This will be the zone kind of anywhere along here where we could be seeing the potential for tornado development. Even, I mean, at 500 millibars, we're still looking at, like, on the southern side, as well as kind of just to the north of this upper low, we're looking at 25 knots there. So it could be that sort of hybrid tornado genesis where you get, transient updraft rotation with some of these storms. But the tornado genesis mechanism is that the storm tends to move along an area of surface convergence, a little boundary vorticity at the surface, and you get that sort of landspout tornado genesis. So maybe some hybrid tornado potential on Tuesday in parts of Saskatchewan. We're going to have to keep an eye on that because the early cloud cover and rain could sort of reduce that potential there. So Tuesday also, this is a little bit further out in the forecast. We're going to be keeping an eye on that across parts of central, perhaps southeastern Saskatchewan for a risk of thunderstorms and even some isolated tornadoes on Tuesday. That's a look at the forecast. I'm going to be out in the field tracking these storms. I'm bringing a special guest along with me as well. So you're going to want to stay tuned to see who that is. We're going to get out there and try to safely get near some of these storms. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for joining, and we'll talk to you next time.